So they give us that AD is equal to DC. So the very first thing that you do is you put tick marks on those sides because that's the first set of congruents that we know about. We know some other things too, however. We know that this is a right angle, all right, which means that this is also a right angle, okay? So both sides of that right angle, in other words, both sides of those perpendicular segments create right angles, so we got congruent angles. What else do we know? What do we know about this shared side? They're the same. So we can put another set of tick marks on BD. So what type of congruence do we have? We don't have these sides. Side angle side. There you go. So we just solved the proof. I'm going to make a little note down here. I'm just going to write side angle side down there to tell myself what we just did. Okay? To remind myself so when we go over to the statements and reasons, I'll remember what I did. All right, so we already wrote down the given. Let's go to number 2. All right, in number 2, we said we can say that angle ADB is congruent to angle CDB, and the reason is definition of perpendicular lines. We haven't really specifically talked about definition of perpendicular lines. Well, yes, you have, because you've been in Coach Rankin's class before, so that's shouldn't be new. But definition of perpendicular just says that two perpendicular lines are going to make right angles. So we've got the right angles. And I could probably be a little more technical with this. I could say first that angle ABD and angle CBD are right angles because of definition of perpendicular lines. Then I could come back and say that these two angles are congruent by the definition of right angles, because all right angles are congruent. I'm going to skip that. I'm just going to say that they are congruent because of the definition of perpendicular lines. All right. And they create right angles. So I'm skipping a little bit, but that's okay for right now. All right, number 3. We'll see how. I tell you what. All right, were y'all using a pencil or pen?
Pen.
All right, I'm not gonna make you erase it. Next time we do one like this, I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna include all the steps. All right, number 3. Well, I should have said first that these angles were right angles by definition of perpendicular lines, then come back and say that the angles are congruent by the definition of right angles, which says all right angles are congruent. But I just skipped that part. That's all right for this time. All right, number 3. We can now say that BD is congruent to BD. And what is the property that we learned a minute ago? It is the reflexive property. The reflexive property. I love proofs. They're my favorite, maybe my favorite part of math. Because it's like it's like solving a problem. I don't know, I just feel a sense of accomplishment every time I do one. All right, so number 4. Do we have enough information now to say that these two triangles are congruent? Do we have side angle side? Yes, we've done it. These sides are congruent, these angles are congruent, these sides are congruent. So now we've got enough to say the triangle ADB is congruent to triangle what? How would you state it?
You said
ADB is congruent to what? CDB. And that is by side angle side. That's all you got it right. So that was pretty easy. All right, so this is just like the previous problem. We were given that MN was congruent to NO, so we put our tick marks. We know that we have right angles because there's one right angle here. That means the other side also has to be a right angle because these are perpendicular segments. All right, we also know that PN is congruent to itself. So because of this, these two triangles are congruent by side angle side. So the second statement after the given is for us to say that angle MNP and angle DONP are right triangles by the definition of perpendicular lines, or you can just say definition of perpendicular. Number 3 would then be that since these two angles are right angles, they are congruent to each other because of the definition of right angles. The definition of right angles says that all right angles are congruent because they're all 90 degrees. Then, in step 4, we can say that PN, congruent to PN, and that is by the reflexive. All you have to do is say reflexive. Reflexive property. It's equal to itself, congruent to itself. And then last, the proof statement. Triangle MNP congruent to triangle ONP by side angle side. Alright, so that's that. So just like the previous problem. The only difference was we included the second step where we said that these angles were right angles by definition of perpendicular, and then we said that the angles were congruent because definition of right angles. Alright, so let's go to the next one. Alright, copy this one down. The first thing we do is solve the proof in the picture. We don't even mess with this stuff until we know this stuff. So let's take what we're given. BC equals CE. Write it down. Do the little tick marks. BC equals CE. Go ahead and put your tick marks on your diagram. Every time when you do a proof with triangles, or with any diagram really, you solve it in the picture before you ever solve it with writing it out. Alright, so BC equals CE. What else do we know? B congruent to E. Alright, we got one mark in there. Got another mark. Okay? B congruent to E. So we've got two things that we need. What else do we have in this picture? Vertical. Very good. So now what type of congruent triangles do we have? What is the rule that makes these congruent? Remember the four things. Side, angle, side, 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 angle, side, angle, 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 side. Angle, side, angle. I'm going to write that down right here. So guess what? We just proved that these are congruent before we even wrote anything down. So now let's write it down. They already have the given up here, so we don't have to do that. All we have to do is say in step 2, all we have to say is that ACB, angle ACB, congruent to angle, how would you say it? What is this? Say what? DCE, good. Angle DCE. And they are congruent because of what, Lacey? You said it. Why are these congruent? Vertical. Vertical angles. Okay? Now the last statement is the proof statement. Proof statement says triangle ACB congruent to triangle DCE by angle side angle. These are pretty easy. Okay? Now the next one I expect, these are Coach Rankin's notes, I expect that the next one's going to look just like this one. Okay? Everybody got this?
Yeah.
Okay?